Hi, I'm Sally, and we're back with some more Magic Bike moments. And today I'm with Dale Walker, who's down in Florida. Hey, how are you, Dale?
Hey, good day.
So Dale is a corrective manual therapist. As an online educator, she develops solutions that teach people to reconstruct their bodies in order to eliminate pain, reverse breakdown, and maximize physical performance. Whoa, that sounds pretty awesome. Do you want to tell me a little bit about how you got into all of this?
It only took about 20 years or so, now maybe a little bit more than that. I started out as a exercise physiologist with a passion always for physical therapy, or you call them physios down where you are. So I started studying the body, and pretty fascinated, and still am, on figuring out the why behind the what. Mm-hmm. So what I do is I see an individual who might be having a problem, or they might have a certain diagnosis. Mm-hmm. But the reason one person could have a diagnosis and another person could have the same diagnosis could be for completely different reasons. Mm-hmm. So I try to figure out the why behind the what.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, so, done a lot of schooling, trained with some amazing mentors. Yeah. My patients, my clients have been my greatest teachers. My own body has been a great teacher, life experiences and whatnot. And I think it's really important. I don't know about medicine, traditional medicine, or, how things are run in your country. In the United States, we don't really have many choices that are, covered, and not everyone has health insurance. Yep. To get health care, or to get care even. And basically coverage is for a medical doctor or a physio or somebody in the traditional medical fields. Yep. And that's not for everybody. So I try to teach people natural ways to heal their own bodies, and then give them options out there of different kinds of specialists to see, and that kind of thing. So I try to bridge the gap between what we call, East and West, because I've been trained in Western medicine and have a lot of experience, personal experience, and other experience in Eastern. So I feel like I can do the right thing depending on the individual's problem or my particular problem. Sometimes I'll go to Western, and sometimes I'll go to Eastern, and a lot of times I do both, which really I think is, the ultimate way to handle things. Oh, yeah. So I've just recently become very interested in the power of the mind.
Oh, yeah.
And part of the recent training that I've been doing with wellness leadership. I've always had kind of an interest in neurology and the placebo effect and research studies. And there are 100 research studies, gazillion research studies on the placebo effect. And then also there's research studies that show that if you think about strengthening a muscle, it will get stronger. Mm-hmm. And these things have been over and over again. So I read this book last year by a neurologist by the name of Oliver Sacks. Mm-hmm. Have you ever heard of him? Mm-hmm. No. He was a famous neurologist. He's actually from the UK, but practiced in the United States. And he's most famous, he's written many books on neurology. Mm-hmm. Interesting books, more like case studies. So they're a bit medical, but then there's a human aspect of them. So he was really very gifted. He just passed a few years ago. And he was made famous by the movie Awakenings.
Oh, yep.
And that was in the early 90s. It was a movie with Robert De Niro and Robin Williams. And Robin Williams portrayed Dr. Sacks in the movie. And it was based on a true story of these individuals who had a catatonic, neurological disorder that was caused after encephalitis. Mm. What interesting. I just read his autobiography actually last year, and I picked it up again because I was so interested in something that he wrote about when Robert De Niro was portraying the patient who had this disease. When Dr. Sachs showed Robin Williams how to evaluate him for the movie, he said in his book that he could not discern Robert De Niro from an actual patient with this disorder.
Yeah, wow.
So I was fascinated, and then he even writes about a little bit later when Robert De Niro was out of character, how he still presented with a issue with his foot that was similar to a patient with this particular problem. And Robert De Niro didn't even realize it. And he was wondering, Dr. Sachs himself was wondering if by playing a patient with this neurological problem, could somebody then make changes to their own neurobiology? And my feeling is that if we can mimic disease, if an actor can mimic disease to a point that an expert cannot discern the difference, then why can't people mimic health? And that's kind of where I am right now in my work. So I'm, in addition to the stuff that I've been trained in, which is, kind of an eclectic form of what I would say, it's like massage therapy, chiropractic, athletic training, and personal training rolled into one.
Yeah.
I really want to offer people this aspect of the mind-body connection as well, and how powerful that is. And in my training, I was also exposed when I was a student to a woman who had something called convergence disorder. And I don't know if you're familiar with that, but convergence disorder is a person who assumes a disease. Right. So in this, the woman had paraplegia, but she wasn't paraplegic. Her mind was paraplegic. Again, showing you the power of the mind. And I guess what I'm meant to be seeing right now, because over break, I'm from New York City originally, New York native. And when I go back, I often treat patients that I've had. And then I recently, because of my online presence, attracted some new folks. And a woman who came into the office was, I thought that she was a foot and ankle patient, which, some of my programs are about. But in essence, she looked to me like she had had a stroke. So I saw her walking down the street, or sure enough, when she was walking in the office, I said to her, have you had a stroke? She insisted that she had not. And she said she's had MRIs. Well, maybe she had convergence disorder. And so again, I think that we need to treat the origin of the problem, again, figuring out the why behind the what. Because oftentimes diseases or injuries are a multitude of causes. So could be a psychological component, or over time there will be a psychological component, trust me, as well as, some physical restrictions and those kinds of things. But for some individuals, the mind is going to have a component also that I feel has not been addressed by the medical community in my country. Again, I can't really speak to other countries, but also the research out there about pain is showing that over and over again. And some fascinating books that I would recommend. There's two of them by, I believe he's a PhD. His name is Norman Doidge, Doidge. And he wrote two books. One is, I think, called How the Brain Heals Itself. And the other one is very similar. How the brain and what he does is he talks about case studies of individuals who have achieved the power of quote unquote healing, or figuring out a different method based on some off the wall kinds of, or non-traditional types of methods. And I just find that stuff really, really interesting. And I think we've just skimmed the surface of the various different aspects of of that. And so when this woman who came to me recently with her presenting, in my mind, as a neurological patient, my feeling is that those individuals with neurological issues really need, I believe, to work on the master of neurology, which is the brain, or the controller of neurology. And again, don't get me wrong, people need to have range of motion and those kinds of things that traditional physical therapy does. But I think that mind training is really the way to go. Oh. And when you think of human development, babies, they spend their entire day just figuring out how to, track with their eyes. And maybe what rehab kind of has to go with, because again, we're only using a portion of our minds. And one of the case studies in Dr. Deutsch's book talked about an individual who had suffered a stroke, and I believe his son was a doctor or neurologist, and this man completely recovered. Essentially, he went back to teach college, as a professor, which was his career prior to his stroke. But post-mortem, after his autopsy, they evaluated his brain, and they realized, they thought that the brain actually healed. It didn't. I mean, I think 95% of his brain was destroyed. Whoa. And he was able to function with that 5%. Yeah. And that to me it speaks volumes. And I remember I had a young woman years ago who was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, so MS, which again, a diagnosis that can present a million different ways. And what she said to me is that she had an MRI, and her MRI showed no changes, but her functioning changed. Yeah. So that tells me it's not just the sclerotic tissue on the brain. And and then going even just a step further, I think that having a diagnosis, while I understand the rationale for it, can be very detrimental to an individual. Because
you're labeled.
We should say to people, like, I have a diagnosis of, not I am.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think that stigma alone is really, really powerful, because again, what will show up on an X-ray or an MRI may have zero bearing, just like that individual with only 5% of his brain left. It might have zero impact on how they're able to function. So I prefer to focus on the function rather than the name of the problem. Yes. And in my country and traditional Western people, and maybe even some Eastern people also, they'll focus on the diagnosis and use some cookie cutter kind of method to figure it out. I'd rather look at functioning and alignment and kind of go from there and fix those things. And then the rest will kind of manifest, which is what I found in my own practice. So, another little fact is that 80% of people who have no symptoms will show a herniated disc on an MRI. Yeah. But then you tell they have a herniated disc, and I remember a teacher of mine saying, it's like you're giving them a license to hurt. Here you go. Herniated disc, L3-4. Okay, well, now I'm an invalid, and again, I think that's very, very damning. I read another book not too long ago about stigmas, and what I found fascinating was that it had to do with intelligence and test-taking results. And what they found is that when an individual who was taking a test had to identify themselves as male or female and identify themselves as female, they did more poorly on math and science tests than when they did identify themselves that way. When a person who is Asian identified themselves as Asian, they did better. So again, these societal stigmas and labels, I think are really, really, really damning. And that's why, I haven't read the book about the power of words, but I think like words that will affect water even, or, something along, the energy. I think that we need to change our dialects when it comes to health.
Yep.
And focus on the well, or what you want.
Yep.
Rather than, fighting the cause, fighting cancer.
Yep.
Let's focus on the health, rather than don't even give it the word. Yep. Don't even say the word.
Yep.
And I really think that is how to, make a complete change. Because again, for me, it's not just about, eliminating a problem or curing a bunion or, whatever, the things that I do, but I really do want to empower people to take control of their own health, learn all of the information that's out there. Maybe they won't find it as fascinating as I do, but maybe we talk about it because I find it fascinating, and think that the information is out there. So it's a matter of accessing it and figuring out what works for a person. And again, it was interesting. I had come upon this, and I even posted about it, where there was the meditation that was like the computer. Where you could choose like what options you wanted. So it was like, it was almost like filling out a Scantron type of thing. That was your meditation. And I think for some people who are minded that way, that's a meditation that they can go with, versus like, floating above the clouds and seeing the streams and the valleys and stuff like that. I mean, I grew up in Queens. Valley. The computer Scantron thing, I could go with, So again, there's not one method that is going to work for everyone. And what I really encourage people to do is figure out what method works for them, and give them a bunch of different things to think about, and resources to look at, so that they can find and test out what works for them. And your answer is out there. It's a matter of figuring it out. I had my own health challenge a few years back after doing an elective surgery, which I never should have done. And it was silly. It was a dental implant. And now I developed what they call a sterile infection, which thank God it was sterile, because that means it didn't spread. But I was literally a VIP to this doctor, because he trained with kind of, at the time, my pseudo father-in-law. So, I was well regarded. The man sent me flowers after surgery, et cetera, et cetera. But then when things went wrong, he wanted no part. He literally told me that, I should go see an allergist. And I knew better, and I know my body. But I lost a month of my life on antibiotics that did not work. I'm going to different people who did not believe me. And then also having to navigate kind of an uncomfortable situation, because I knew his mentor and I was in touch with him also. And my feeling is that if it could happen to me, given everything that I know, if I didn't know what I did, I could very well be addicted to pain pills right now. So easy. But thankfully I had the knowledge and the resources and the voice to navigate a very touchy situation, and it still was detrimental to me. And I think that's part of the reason why I'm so passionate about what I do, because I know what can happen. I've seen can happen in my patients and clients. And, I do believe that a lot of people go into surgery very laissez-faire about it, when it really is a big deal. And I think in the United States, the third leading cause of death is medical errors. I mean, it's kind of crazy. So, you really do have to, I think, exhaust all other options before going there. And another thing, I just recently spoke to a woman who was getting a knee replacement. And I asked her how, I said, if you don't mind, could you tell me how old you are? And she was in her 60s. And I said, you're going to need a new one in 15 years. So you might want to time it, and again, it's just not what, I don't think doctors tell patients this. And, I again had a patient who was in his 80s, and his problems, his inability to walk, his issue for pain was that he needed a new hip. But because of his age and because of the other diseases that were going on with him, he wasn't healthy enough to get one. So he wound up dying a slow, painful death. And that's the thing, we need to, be mindful of. And, we have a choice. I believe we have a choice. I don't think it's ever too late to change the body.
Yep.
And I've made changes in people in their 90s with their alignment of their bodies. A woman with scoliosis. So, connective tissue is connective tissue regardless of the age. It's more about the attitude and, undoing the habits. And a lot of that is the mind.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I could talk about this for hours, but the whole power, the power of the words that we use, our whole psyche takes it on. It's incredible. I mean, the whole concept of thinking of ourselves, thinking to wellness, not illness, with that stigma with the labeling, and then, then you become that, you become the illness.
Yes.
It's interesting. I was doing an interview with someone else the other day, and there's a huge percentage of carers of people with illness that actually take on that illness, that develop an illness. So this was about dementia and Alzheimer's, I think, and they found a percentage of carers actually ended up with Alzheimer's or dementia. And, you become what you think. And we just don't really have this strong enough grasp of the use of our language, of the words that we absorb it within the words. Even looking at a negative word or the word negative, your body goes into a negative state. So the whole psychology and using our minds, and you've cited so many examples of people that physically shouldn't be able to mend themselves, and yet they've done it. Even with that distorted brain.
And conversely, people who shouldn't be sick and are.
Yeah, that's right. It's too easy to just go without having to think about anything, go to a doctor, be labelled, have this operation, and you're fixed without being accountable yourself. It's your body. You need to own it, and then feel into your illnesses or your disabilities or whatever, and work towards making yourself better. We can't rely on everybody else to fix us. We have to fix ourselves. I'm a huge believer in that, and it's possible to do it. But I could talk about that until the cows come home. I mean, we're an aging population, and we need to start preventing illness down the track, not just looking after ourselves now. But I was a couple of months ago, I heard that and it may well be untrue, but it made me think that every child born on that day, 50% were going to live to 100 or more. It's, we've got a long time of having to manage our bodies, and, old age is old age, and things do start to wear and tear. So the more we can do to look after ourselves and think ourselves better into a better state, it's amazing. Look, but anyway, we should move on because I could chat about this all the time. So with the people that you're dealing with, what do you think is the biggest issue facing them all up? The biggest issue, would it be ignorance or?
I would say a lack of information.
Yeah.
I've become very interested in Tim Ferriss's work. He's written a book called The 4-Hour Body. He also wrote The 4-Hour Work Week. He's kind of what I call like a hacker.
Yep.
So figures out hacks around things.
Yep.
And they are based on research. And, there are ways, he gives you, and I very much respect him and I like his work. it's even difficult for me to digest some of his stuff on exercise. And, you know, even when he was talking about the body, I didn't necessarily agree with some of the stuff that he had written. But there is research out there to document that, you know, in some cases we are over exercising. I think more of a emphasis on exercise than nutrition, where the research shows that for, you know, both are important. Again, I just think that there's a lack of knowledge, and there's a way that I hope to empower people to, you know, be able to be fit without, you know, having to make a huge effort, be more strategic, I guess is the best way. To be, it's about the little things. So, for example, you know, again, research is showing that, you know, sitting all day is work. You know, you can't even go to a gym and undo the damage of sitting, but you can take breaks. You can, you know, do simple exercises. I have some great chair exercises that I think are awesome. And, you know, different ways to, you know, undo that, you know, negative kind of situation that so many of us are put into. So, you know, I try to avoid sitting as much as possible. Thankfully, I'm in a business or career that I don't have to sit a lot. And it's also mostly about changing position. And it was really funny because I learned even before the research came out, when I was a student in physical therapy 20 years ago, the very first day I had a wonderful orthopedics teacher, and I still quote her today. But the very first class, she said, I want everyone to sit in the most comfortable position you can get into. So she had us go, and, you know, however you wanted to be. And she said, now stay there. And she timed us, and no one could stay in that position for more than a minute. Because the body's not meant. So literally, again, people with a paralysis, you know, their skin will literally break down by being in one position for too much. So ergonomics, while, you know, kind of important, it doesn't dismiss the changing of position being, you know, monumental. And even these desks, you know, again, you know, I always kind of go back to cave people. Like, if you want to be healthy, just like a cave person, they didn't just stand. You know what I mean? They're kind of moving around and stuff like that. So again, you know, just teaching people little tricks and giving them, I think it's a lack of knowledge, to be very honest.
So that leads me into my next question. Overall, what would be your top 3 tips to help them, you know, starting out with this lack of knowledge? I mean, where could you start? What would be the starting point? That's a great question. I think it would probably depend on a person's goals. So what is their primary challenge now? So when I work with a patient one-on-one, I usually say to them, if I could change 3 things today, what would it be? So it would be like, let's just say somebody would say, I want to lose weight. Okay, well then they would need to, you know, go down that tract. If it's get rid of pain in my back, then it would be, you know, then it's a different kind of thing. But again, I believe it's research. It's choosing the right people to help you. And again, it's taking on, you know, there are certain things that we should trust other people with. Our bodies, I don't think, are one of them. And I believe that people have an innate, or people don't listen to their bodies, or people have lost the ability to listen to their bodies, much like they're listening to their instincts. Some people are very good at it. I'm blessed to be one of them. So again, it's also figuring out, you know, finding the right help. And in my country, most people will go to a doctor that's in their network, or a doctor that lives, you know, that's close by. And I tell people, you know, you don't go to the closest supermarket. You can get your food, or go to the closest, I don't know, car wash. You know, but when it comes to your health, go to the best person. And that typically, there are certain characteristics that I find, that I've found, and what I look for in a health professional. One, are they passionate about what they do?
Do they publish? Are they YouTube? You know, do they do research? You know, how involved are they in the societies or whatever? Experience. You can't negate experience. I mean, minimum, say 20 years. You're more experienced people. And then also, I would just say word of mouth. That's another thing. You know, people will talk about their aches and pains and that kind of thing. But to have a conversation about like, hey, this worked for so-and-so, you might want to look into it. And then keeping an open mind about, and again, you know, being exposed to alternative forms of care that can be brought into, you know, into the model. Again, in the United States, we are phenomenal at keeping people alive. If you're in an accident, great place to be, a really good place. But as far as being a healthy country, we're the pits. You know, so there's, you know, if I'm in a car accident, I'm going to go to a Western doctor, emergency room, you know, definitely. But, you know, if I'm, you know, not too long ago, I was under a lot of stress. I had a tremor. And I'm like, I'm not going to a doctor because, again, I'm like, they'll find something wrong with me. And then I'm going to go down that bunny hole. And I choose not to take, if I can, I choose not to take medication. I don't even take an Aspirin. So I knew, you know, again, if that's how you feel, then you have to go to the doctor or the healthcare provider that's in tune with what works best for you. And, you know, medications for me are just not something that agree with me. So I go the other way. So I think, again, figuring out what works best for an individual and knowing all of the different wonderful practitioners that are out there. I mean, there are things out there that blow my mind that I've never been exposed to. And open to trying and then tuned in to realizing what works and what doesn't. And the other piece of advice that I would give is that if it's not working, try something else. Try someone. I think I lost you.
All right, I'm here.
There we go. I just pressed a button. I got all excited. Like,
it's all good.
You know, I never want to work with somebody who is not getting better.
Yep.
You know, and I feel an obligation to tell somebody, you know, I don't think I'm the right fit for you because we're not having success here. You know, I'm fortunate that I have pretty good success, but, you know, if somebody's not getting better, I just feel that they need to find someone who can help them. And maybe my modality or, you know, my magic is just not the magic that they need. So again, you know, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing, expecting a different result. So if you're not, you know, getting to where you want to be, and here's the other thing too, is that a lot of times we're bonded with people. And, you know, somebody might take you really far and maybe even for like one particular problem, but they might not be fit for something else. And being open to, you know, again, you go to your person, but understand that, hey, you know, maybe this is not the right fit for this particular issue and I need to go someplace else.
It's just, you know, everybody's shoes fit on different feet, you know, and everybody
exactly
different things, you know, and what you say, what works for one
exactly
works for the other, but you have to have the intention of wanting to help yourself. Mentality of just going without thinking and just relying on others to change you, fix you. You have to be accountable yourself. You have to, otherwise change cannot happen. You know, it's just the Band-Aid effect. So look, I could talk all day about this, but I mean, I just love what you. I think it's awesome. So if people want to find out further and get in touch with you, where can I send
I have a website. It's fixyouonline.com.
Fixyouonline.com.
Online.com.
Yeah, wow.
And, starting to get that going. And again, you know, here's the thing. This is kind of the reason why, one of the reasons why I did this is because all of the information that we can talk about, I might only have 45 minutes with somebody, and I can't give them everything that I could give them in my programs.
Yep.
So, I'm not even sure that any healthcare practitioner could, because it's just so much information.
Yep.
So my idea was to kind of put it into one place so that people can have the resources and, again, figure out what works for them. And, my programs are free trial. So you're billed after 30 days because, again, I don't want to take people's money if that's the right fit for them. Yeah. I believe pretty strongly in that. So, that's why I offer it. And I'd rather them take that money and not give up, but then go to apply it to a different person. And I never poo-poo anything because, again, you have to figure out what works for you. And, again, just allowing people to have that information is really what I'm about.
Oh, Dale, I love your work, bringing the world to wellness. It's just awesome. It's just absolutely awesome. I love the passion that you have for it all. I just think it's brilliant. So, thank you so much for coming onto the program today. And
it's been a pleasure.
Look forward to following you up and with just watching what you're doing and how you're doing it. I just think it's brilliant. And, everything is evolving, but, the more people you can touch, the better, it's just brilliant. So yes,
exactly.
Thanks for coming on, Del, and we'll keep in touch. And
that's great.
Well, stay well, and we'll chat soon. All right. See you later, darling. Bye.
Bye now.